The story of Natalie Wood begins long before the night the world learned she was gone. It begins with bright lights, velvet seats, and the golden age of Hollywood, a time when studios ruled everything. Dreams were shaped by contracts, and the line between real life and movie fantasy often blurred. Natalie wasn't born into fame, yet it seemed from the very beginning that destiny had a path reserved, especially for her. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in San Francisco in 1938 to Russian immigrant parents, her childhood wasn't filled with fairy tales or simplicity. It was filled with ambition, cultural displacement, and a mother who believed with unshakable certainty that her daughter's future belonged on the screen. Natalie often spoke later in life about how her identity was created long before she knew who she was. Her mother, Maria, was determined, strict, and deeply convinced that Natalie was meant to be a star. Some children played with dolls. Natalie practiced expressions, rehearsed movements, and learned to smile for cameras. Some children were encouraged to imagine. Natalie was encouraged to perform. Her childhood wasn't one of scraped knees and playground friendships, but contracts, callbacks, and auditions. It was as though Natalie grew up in the shadow of a dream that wasn't fully hers, yet eventually became part of her soul. She was only 4 years old when she appeared in her first film. By age 8, she starred in one of the most beloved Christmas movies in American film history, Miracle on 34th Street. Suddenly, the world took notice. Those soulful brown eyes, that soft voice, that natural screen presence. It was as if she belonged on film, even before she understood what it meant. Her expressions carried sincerity and depth unexpected for someone so young. Audiences adored her. Studios saw her as an asset. And Natalie became part of an industry long before she fully understood what it asked of her. As her roles increased, so did the expectations. Hollywood had a way of shaping identities, polishing actors into images the public would never question. Natalie was molded into the role of the perfect child star, graceful, obedient, endlessly photogenic. Yet behind the scenes, she was still a child navigating a world dominated by adults, pressure, and publicity. The innocence of youth was a luxury she rarely experienced. Growing up in front of cameras meant growing up watched, measured, critiqued. Every change in her appearance, every small shift in mood, every role she accepted, all became part of her public image. She went from the charming child actor to a young woman on screen, and that transition was anything but easy. Hollywood historically struggled with allowing its child stars to grow. Natalie was no exception. Casting directors weren't sure who she was supposed to become: a sweetheart, a dramatic actress, a romantic lead. Instead of waiting for the industry to decide for her, Natalie worked tirelessly to shape her own destiny. Her breakthrough as an adult actress came in Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean, one of the most iconic figures in film history. The role wasn't just another job, it was a transformation. In the film, Natalie expressed vulnerability, longing, emotional conflict, emotions raw enough to make audiences forget she had ever been a child on screen. She wasn't just performing, she was revealing. It marked the beginning of a chapter where Natalie wasn't just admired, she was respected. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination at just 17. Suddenly, she wasn't just Natalie Wood, the child star, she was Natalie Wood, the serious actress. And with that recognition came something new: validation. For the first time in her life, her work was her own. The applause wasn't for her being adorable or precocious, it was for her talent, depth, and emotional truth. Yet even with her rising career, Natalie's life remained intertwined with loneliness, uncertainty, and a longing for stability. Growing up as a performer meant her sense of belonging had always been fragile. Fame gave her admiration, but it did not give her emotional safety. Then came someone who changed everything: Robert Wagner. Robert was older, elegant, confident, the kind of Hollywood presence that carried charm and mystery without effort. Natalie had admired him from afar when she was still a young actress, long before they met. To her, he represented everything glamorous about Hollywood. When their paths finally crossed, spark seemed inevitable. They married when Natalie was just 18, and she stepped into a world that was both romantic and complicated. Their marriage was celebrated by fans and studios alike. They were considered one of Hollywood's most beautiful couples, talented, photogenic, perfectly matched. But behind the polished images and magazine covers, their relationship, like many in Hollywood, struggled under the weight of career pressures, public expectations, and the complexity of two strong personalities. Learning to navigate adulthood together, love was there, but love alone didn't make life simple. After several years, the marriage ended, and Natalie entered a period of self-reflection. She continued working, starring in films like West Side Story and Splendour in the Grass. Her performances were emotional, layered, often reflecting the inner conflicts she rarely spoke about publicly. Natalie wasn't just an actor, she was a storyteller. Every role she embodied carried a piece of her truth. She became a mother later, and with motherhood came a new softness and strength. Natalie cherished her daughters deeply. She once expressed in an interview that becoming a mother helped her feel grounded, something she had rarely experienced growing up in the unpredictable world of Hollywood. And somewhere during this new chapter of maturity, reflection, and emotional evolution, Robert Wagner Ray entered her life. They remarried, a rare second chance at love that fascinated the public. Their reunion wasn't impulsive. It was tender, cautious, and filled with history, not just romantic history, but emotional history, the kind that only two people who had walked away and returned could ever truly understand. To many, it seemed like closure, a love story finding its rightful ending. But life rarely follows fairy tale structure. On the night of November 28, 1981, Natalie Wood boarded a yacht named Splendour near Catalina Island. She traveled with her husband, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain. It was meant to be a relaxing evening, a quiet escape from the demands of Hollywood life. But by morning, Natalie Wood was missing. Hours later, her body was discovered in the water nearby. The news sent shockwaves across the world. Natalie was only 43 years old, young, vibrant, still full of unfinished dreams. Hollywood paused. Fans mourned. The world asked questions. Official statements explained elements of what was known: that she had been last seen alive on the yacht, that the night had been dark, that the circumstances remained unclear. The cause of death was ruled accidental drowning. No harmful or disrespectful public claims were encouraged, and her family privately grieved, protected, and preserved dignity. Yet despite the official findings, one feeling lingered in the air: uncertainty. Not accusation, not speculation, simply uncertainty. Natalie Wood's passing did not just end a life, it began a mystery filled not with sensationalism, but with longing for understanding. The world wasn't searching for scandal, it was searching for closure. For years, the tragedy wasn't discussed openly out of respect, grief, and emotional protection. Her daughters grew up remembering a mother who loved them deeply, not a headline. Natalie's legacy continued through her work. Films that still breathe with emotion, lines that echo decades late, roles that shape cinema. She had lived a life in front of the world, yet left a final chapter the world could not fully explain. And maybe, in some way, that was fitting. Natalie Wood had always existed somewhere, between the magic of film and the vulnerability of being human, forever admired, forever remembered, forever slightly out of reach. The evening of November 28, 1981, began like any other glamorous Hollywood getaway. Natalie Wood boarded the yacht Splendour, wearing a soft sweater and a smile that seemed warm but slightly distant. To the world, she was still the glamorous actress with doe-like eyes and a voice that carried both grace and fragility. But those close to her sensed something simmering beneath the surface: fatigue, tension, and unspoken fears. The trip was supposed to be relaxing, just a quiet escape to Catalina Island with her husband, actor Robert Wagner, and her co-star and longtime friend, Christopher Walken. But in truth, something about this gathering already felt uneasy, as though fate was quietly pulling up a chair. As the sun sank into the Pacific and the sky darkened into deep shades of violet and indigo, the world aboard the yacht changed tone. The warm daylight laughter slowly faded, replaced by strained conversations and an atmosphere thick with tension. Natalie Wood, who had spent so much of her life in the public eye, played her role with elegance, smiling, laughing, pretending everything was fine. But inside, she was restless. Water always made her uneasy. Some said she feared it. Others said it was simply discomfort. But whatever it was, Natalie never liked being on boats at night. And yet, here she was, drifting in the dark sea, far from shore, far from safety, far from control. As the hours passed, wine glasses emptied, voices grew louder, and emotions sharpened like broken glass. Witnesses later said they heard fragments laughter at first, then raised voices, then something that sounded like an argument. The details have shifted through the retellings, but one truth remains consistent. The evening was no longer calm. At some point, Natalie left the group and retreated. Whether she needed air, space, or silence, no one fully knew. But the emotional weight she carried was visible in her eyes. Eyes that had seen fame, fear, heartbreak, and secrets. A soft wind moved across the ocean, rocking the yacht gently. Waves tapped against its sides in a rhythm that sounded almost like footsteps, steady, cold, and indifferent. Natalie paced, wrapped in her red jacket. That red jacket would later become one of the most haunting symbols of her final hours, floating in salt water beneath a moonlit sky. At that moment, alone on deck, she must have been deep in thought about her marriage, her fears, her career, and perhaps her longing for peace. No cameras, no scripts, no spotlight, just the ocean and the silence she rarely got to experience. Inside the cabin, voices rose again. Some say jealousy sparked the tension. Others believe it was simply a misunderstanding that spiraled. Whatever happened, it shifted the energy on the boat irrevocably. Christopher Walken remained calm, distant, thoughtful, a man observing rather than participating. Robert Wagner, however, seemed restless, emotional, overwhelmed. Love, when deep and complicated, can sometimes turn loud, and everyone on that boat knew it. Later, the timeline blurs. Statements changed. Memories contradicted one another. But somewhere between midnight and the dark hours before dawn, Natalie Wood disappeared. No splash was heard, or if it was, no one recognized it. No cry for help was recorded, or perhaps the sea swallowed it. One moment she was there, wrapped in red warmth against the cold night air, and the next, she was gone. When her absence was finally noticed, a chilling panic took hold. Fear spread through the cabin as flashlights swept across black waves, calling her name into a night that refused to answer. The ocean continued its rhythm, endlessly calm, almost indifferent to human fear. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like eternity. A search began, frantic, desperate, heartbreaking. But deep inside, everyone likely knew something irreversible had happened. At 7:44 a.m. the next morning, a small inflatable dinghy, the Valiant, was discovered near Catalina Island, gently swaying with the tide. A short distance away, floating face down in the water, was Natalie Wood. Her red jacket was still wrapped around her, heavy with water, clinging to her body, motionless. The same woman whose face had lit up cinema screens for decades, now drifted silently, surrounded by a horizon she never wanted to face alone. The sky was pale that morning, as if the world itself was mourning quietly. News spread quickly, first to law enforcement, then to the Coast Guard, then, within hours, to the world. The headlines were shocking, surreal, unbelievable. Natalie Wood gone, lost to the sea. Fans across the globe froze, reading the news again and again, hoping it was a mistake. Hollywood icons are not supposed to vanish. They are larger than life, eternal, immortal, untouchable. But Natalie Wood was not a myth. She was a woman, vulnerable, human, and heartbreakingly mortal. The official explanation at the time was tragic, simple, and painful: accidental drowning. It was the kind of conclusion that offered closure on paper, but not in hearts. Not for her friends, not for her fans, not for the investigators, and not for the generations who would later read the reports and find themselves whispering the same lingering question: how does someone disappear from a yacht without anyone noticing? The world wanted answers, but the ocean vast, silent, and eternal offered none. And slowly, a mystery began forming, one that would never truly fade. In the days following Natalie Wood's passing, Hollywood felt strangely quieter, as if a curtain had fallen not just on a life, but on an entire chapter of its golden era. Newspapers were filled with photographs of her luminous smile, her soft eyes, and the graceful presence millions had adored for decades. Fans gathered outside theaters, homes, and memorial sites, leaving flowers, handwritten letters, and trembling candles against the cold winter air. For many, the tragedy felt deeply personal because Natalie Wood was not simply an actress. She was a companion through childhood films, emotional dramas, and unforgettable love stories. Her sudden disappearance from the world seemed unreal, like a story missing its ending. The initial investigation attempted to bring order to chaos. Statements were collected, timelines reviewed, and evidence examined. Yet, the more details emerged, the more complicated the picture became. The coroner's report suggested bruises, a scratch, and a few unexplained marks, injuries that could have been accidental or could have pointed to something more. But no definitive answer arrived. Instead, the explanation remained carefully phrased, clinical, yet hauntingly vague, an accidental drowning and hypothermia. And while those words offered a conclusion, they did not offer understanding. Rumors began to whisper through Hollywood circles, soft at first, then louder with time. Some claimed there were arguments that night. Others recalled tension, insecurity, misunderstandings, and emotional vulnerability. But rumors are not proof, and memories are fragile, shifting with time and emotion. Christopher Walken rarely spoke publicly about that night, out of respect, grief, or the weight of uncertainty only he understood. Robert Wagner, devastated, struggled with the loss not just of a public figure, but of a wife he had loved for years, through marriage, separation, reconciliation, and the tender fragility that comes with history and memory. Natalie's funeral was somber, elegant, and deeply emotional. Figures from Hollywood's golden age attended: Elizabeth Taylor, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, Laurence Olivier, and so many others who had worked beside her, admired her, or grown up watching her performances. As the final prayers were spoken and silence settled over the cemetery, a gentle breeze carried across the trees. It was soft, almost like a whisper, as though the world was exhaling in sorrow. Her fans around the globe watched the news in disbelief, wiping tears from eyes that had once lit up joyfully at the sight of her films. As decades passed, the mystery surrounding her final moments never completely faded. In fact, it deepened. New witnesses emerged, memories resurfaced, and small pieces of information once overlooked gained new weight. In 2011, the case was reopened, not to accuse or blame, but to understand. Investigators reassessed statements, evidence, and circumstances. A revised report listed her passing as drowning and other undetermined factors. Those last words, undetermined factors, reopened the conversation globally. People debated, documentaries were filmed, articles were written, and theories multiplied. Yet still, the truth remained elusive, wrapped in time and silence. But perhaps the most important part of Natalie Wood's story is not the unanswered questions, but the life she lived before them. She began as a child actor, with shy eyes and a gentle voice. Yet she grew into a powerful presence, a woman who took control of her career, shaped her roles, and pushed through an industry that wasn't always kind to women. She portrayed complexity at a time when Hollywood often wanted simplicity. She showed vulnerability without weakness, innocence without naivety, and beauty without arrogance. Behind the scenes, she was known for kindness, not just in public gestures, but in quiet, private moments. She extended warmth to young actors, compassion to struggling co-stars, and respect to the crew members who worked long hours behind the camera. Those who knew her never described her as distant or untouchable, but rather as warm, intuitive, and deeply human. Her daughters grew up carrying her memory not as an unsolved headline, but as love steady, tender, and everlasting. Her family continued to honor her, not through speculation, but through gratitude for the years they shared. Her films continued to play on screens across generations, each role a reminder of her talent, her voice, her ability to breathe emotion into every frame. And so, today, when we speak about Natalie Wood, we speak with both awe and softness. We remember the young girl who dreamed under stage lights, the woman who carved a space in Hollywood history, and the mother, daughter, and friend who lived a life of passion and depth. The mystery surrounding her final hours will likely remain part of her story, not because the world seeks drama, but because it seeks understanding. We are, after all, naturally drawn to the unknown. But perhaps Natalie Wood's legacy is meant to leave us with two truths. First, that life can be breathtakingly fragile, and second, that love, memory, and art can outlast even the deepest questions. Today, when her films flicker across screens, whether in black and white nostalgia or warm Technicolor, she lives again. Her voice echoes, her eyes sparkle, her presence returns. Natalie Wood remains, even now, one of Hollywood's brightest stars, not because of the mystery of her final night, but because of the brilliance of her life, a life that, though tragically short, continues to shine.